it now. Thank you, Anna. Okay, so Adler.
No problem.
So it is the birthday of Dagmar Adler. Okay, I begin from slideshow, the beginning. Do you see the page, Dagmar Adler? I think I forgot to share the screen.
Yeah, you need to share it because we cannot see it.
Yes, well, you know, Anna, you forgot to tell me to do that.
I'm only on the recording duty, so.
No. You have to amplify the spectrum of your duties. Okay, thank you. So I think you see it now, right? You see the Dagmar Adler thing.
Yes.
Yes,
Okay.
we do.
Okay, so it is his birthday, and he was actually an European. I mean, he was born in Germany. Dagmar Adler, his mother died when he was born, so he grew without a mother, and his father took him to the States. I don't know, maybe he was 10 years old or something like this. His father was a rabbi and for a very important congregation in Chicago. In fact, I read on Wikipedia that the latest building, or one of the later buildings that they had, was built by Minoru Yamasaki, the one who built the fallen World Trade Center. Anyway, so Adler had a very kind of like Tadawando, very, minimalist training, some elementary schooling, yet he left school and he began to as a drafter somewhere, and then at 27 he also went to war. When he returned from war, he opened his office at 27 with someone else, and then in a few years later he hired Sullivan. And after he hired Sullivan as a designer and as a draftsperson, in 3 years, he made Sullivan his partner. So Adler made Sullivan his partner and not the other way around. I like him. You can tell this is an intelligent man, an intense man, a serious man. I mean, what I see here in this picture and the following pictures, I like him. Maybe I like him even more than Sullivan or Wright. It's something about him that I like. And Frank Lloyd Wright, who was very critical of everybody, probably you know, he was very affectionate towards Sullivan, but I read when I prepared this material that he was even more affectionate towards the Frank Lloyd Wright called Adler the American engineer, the big chief. Well, in a way, yes, because of this man, they both had a job, Sullivan and Wright. Bravo to him. Yes, unfortunately, he died. He could have lived longer, but at one moment, he separated from Sullivan. They broke up the partnership. I didn't quite understand why. And so from that moment on, actually, they both had less success. Both Adler and Sullivan. Sullivan kept building, but smaller buildings. And I think their partnership was very fruitful to both of them. Here he is with his wife. And yeah, and books, of course. Yeah, he did look, and he does look like an interesting man. More like a poet, you would say. Anyway, hello, Mr. Adler. Happy birthday to you. Now, we start investigating the work of Adler and Sullivan. We begin with their first house, which was actually criminally demolished in 1962, and the crime was recorded in photographs, and you'll see the photographs, and those photographs make me angry, because it is incomprehensible to me that we destroy good buildings, interesting buildings, and this is being done everywhere in the world, you know. Capitalism is ferocious. So this is the building they destroyed, if you can believe it, in 1962. It lasted more than 100 years and it was demolished. And you'll see the pictures of the crime. I don't know when human beings will wake up, really. I'm afraid in this case, I have to quote from Rem Koolhaas, we human beings never learn. It does seem that we never learn. How could you destroy such a building? Okay, it is historicist. I agree. But it is a quality building, you can tell. I mean, this is not the kind of building that you demolish. Look, and it was done by Adler and Sullivan. It was their first house that they built, and quite a house, as you can tell. Now, I really, please, you study architecture, some of you are architects, let's do something and stop or diminish the madness. It is a madness in the world. And then we complain, you know, that there is pollution, that there is no sustainability, there is no ecology. But who is responsible for this? I think we are responsible for this because it is incredible what we do. We are completely without sensitivity, even towards our own culture, that is the human culture. So, where time stood still, a visual record of William Borden residence shortly before its demolition in 1962. And you see some very moving pictures. You see already the roof is destroyed. What is amazing is that this building was much more valuable architecturally than the building next door, which you can see there. You know, the poor blue-collar workers, they were told to ruin it, but it's not their mistake, really. They had the job to do. But their bosses were the ones, and more than their bosses, their clients. You know, and this is being done everywhere, in every country in the world. We destroy good things because we neglect what the British writer Froster said, only connect. We do not want to connect with something that preceded us because we are so egocentrical and so without sensitivity that we don't understand that we are all together on the spiral of time.
Dan, may I add something there?
Please.
It's quite funny that you say that because you know, we built micro libraries and we have built 5 of them, and one is already torn down, you know, without even opening it. And it's exactly the same story. We built it with a regent in Bojanegoro. A regent is like a mayor, but for a larger area. And then a new one from a different party got elected, and she was somehow mad with his legacy. And there were some formal mistakes in the building permit, so she just got rid of it. She just erased a perfectly nice, freshly built building just out of ego. And she could have easily getting anything done with permit and I don't know what, you know. And then the building, the city got it for free. It was sponsored. Can you imagine that?
Yeah, unfortunately, I do imagine it because I had seen similar crimes. It is unbelievable. And Sullivan suffered a lot because of this, but also Frank Lloyd Wright. The Larkin building, which was a masterpiece of Wright, was, you know, totally demolished to make room for a parking lot in the enlightened country called the United States of America, the lighting house of the world. And this also there, you know, and they knew in 1962, they knew who Sullivan was, they knew who Adler was, they knew who Frank Lloyd Wright was, and they still ignored it. You see the sign, the Speedway Wrecking Company, Chicago. You know, the sooner the better, you know, let's get rid of it quickly, you know, the quicker the better. It's just an example among other examples, and what you told us, Florian, is unfortunately only underlining, you know, is only encouraging my pessimism and my distress. Look, and we have to be realistic. Sooner or later, even some of our buildings will have the same destiny, or your buildings. Yes, look what they destroyed. You know, what was wrong with this? You know, probably this kind of, detailing and woodwork not easily could be reproduced these days. It was destroyed. Who cared that it was Sullivan behind the design, you know? Nobody cared. It's just unbelievable. Anyway. With the kind of blindness human beings are so-called capable of having, at one day I wouldn't be surprised that they demolish Sagrada Familia. You know, they. Okay, now we arrive at another house. I think I have only one or two pictures with this house. So these are very early houses that Adler and Sullivan did. Then in the next presentation, you'll see the evolution of Sullivan by himself. This one was not destroyed, but it's, you know, it's a much smaller house. Then the Halstead house, 1884. So almost 140 years ago. Now, if you compare, and that's why I wanted to show also Frank Lloyd Wright in Oak Park. Frank Lloyd Wright was more courageous. Sullivan was courageous in his own way, but he also had a stronger affinity or connection with the past, and that's why. But this also makes him in a way maybe. And I have to be careful here because I love both Sullivan and Wright. But Wright sometimes, in the name of novelty, would erase connections with a certain past, not Sullivan. So in the tension between tradition and innovation, I would say that Sullivan, in his case, and when I say Sullivan, at this level, I mean, at this time when he worked with Adler, it goes for both. They didn't neglect a certain tradition, and maybe they seem to be a little bit less creative, but it's debatable what we mean by creativity, because connecting with a certain past could be in itself a sign of very sophisticated and subtle creativity. Sometimes it is easier to say no. This house, where Frank Lloyd Wright, he was very young in the office of Adler and Sullivan, and it's a famous house. In fact, Frank Lloyd Wright called it the first modern house in the United States. So it was built in 1892. It's a larger house. And apparently, Wright had a bigger role, especially handling the spaces inside the interior. It was initially called Charnley House. Persky, the name comes from a philanthropist who gave the money, you know, kind of recently for a certain society, I forgot its name, of historical preservation or something, to repair it and to move in. So now, you know, the house is called Charnley Persky, but initially it was just, I forgot the other two names of Mr. Charnley, who commissioned the house in 1892. So this is the house that Frank Lloyd Wright, the young draftsperson in the office of Adler and Sullivan, called the most modern, the first modern house in the United States. And it does look modern, even, you know, of course we can talk about what modern or modernity means, but yes, you don't have at all, almost at all, any kinds of historicist references. It is resolute. It has clean lines, so to speak. So it was also refurbished, so it's in good condition. And yeah, it survived the possibility of having a bulldozer approaching it. So it's a very famous house in Chicago and for modern architecture in the United States and beyond, actually. And its paternity belongs to both Sullivan and Wright. But here I will not forget Adler. And I think Adler, I have a sympathy for people like Adler, who somehow in the shadow are extremely generous. And in a way, because of such people, things happen. Maybe he was not the designer per se, although the company, the firm was his mainly. He was the first one who founded it. Uh, but I'm absolutely sure he agreed with the work that was done in his office. After all, it was his name, it was his firm. In a way, both Sullivan and Wright worked for him. So it's also him, even if he maybe didn't design himself the house. But I would still include him on the list with the authors. Now you see here some ornamental, like on the parapet where the loggia is. This is almost a typical Sullivan, but there is more to it. It's not just Wright in this building. And we'll have a chance to compare this building with the early buildings built by Frank Lloyd Wright in Oak Park a little later today. That is, if my energy will allow me to go through 800, 900 pictures today. I pray to God that it will happen. Okay, so yeah, it looks impressive, inside particularly. Outside is maybe not the most interesting building in the world, but considering when it was made 130 years ago, and is still alive and doing well. Now we'll see 3 tombs. This is interesting, in the 19th century, it was the end of the 19th century and maybe even earlier, great architects also built, domus aeternas, tombs. This is not happening any longer. Really, very rarely. I don't know. Did Rem Koolhaas build any tomb, or Frank Gehry, or Zaha Hadid, or even Tadao Ando? No. So this is an interesting subject. Why is it that in the 19th century, there was an appreciation for architectural work of the highest value for the afterlife, for the life, yes, for the afterlife, but not today. Didn't we actually devalue death to the point that, yes, now with the pandemic and other catastrophes, we are maybe forced to reconsider, but we are still devaluing death because it is vulgarized and trivialized continuously on our TVs and in the media. There was never so much death in our proximity because of the media as it is today. You turn on the TV, if you have a TV, I don't, but many people do. You turn on the TV, what do you see? Crimes, death, rapings, and so on. But exactly because of this, paradoxically, death became less serious. We don't take it seriously because we see too much of it, so-called on the media, on the internet, and everywhere. It's just death, and the more scandalous, the better. But who builds something like this for the afterlife today? This is beauty. This is the talent, the genius of Louis Sullivan employed for the afterlife. And we don't do this sort of thing today. And I think this is a major change in our mentality, that we do not consider the afterlife as something worthy really of more attention. Of course, there are exceptions like Carlos Carpas Brion Cemetery, or the Eric Miralles Cemetery near Barcelona. There are a few exceptions, but very few, and usually of a special kind, not like that. This is something that we could still do if there was an interest. Now here, Sullivan, and this is his work, and I keep saying it, you know, that we deprived modern architecture of ornamentation, and I think it is a problem with this because we impoverished architecture to the point of building actually boring buildings because we are only obsessed with space, 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 and again space, and mostly with white walls. But here you see in these details, you see a richness and the beauty that that makes me actually envious. You know, why is it that we do not come back to some form of enriching our buildings in a similar way? And it can be done now even easier because of parametry and scripting and programming. The ornament is coming back if we are to think just of Mark Fons and Michael Hansmeyer, among others, but still, I think there is a long way to go. You see here, everything is an event. Even some, you know, very prosaic parts of that we don't even think of. Although someone like Stephen Hall, I have seen studies by Stephen Hall for such so-called minor elements of architecture, very beautiful, and in showing again an intense interest in architectural elements, which became just utilitarian for most of us. This is another tomb, the Wainwright tomb, and it was built 2 years later, a little bit different. I do think that the relationship between life and the afterlife is like in an hourglass. They connect with each other and they're equally important. And I mean, I know what I say is maybe a little bit sounds strange, but I do think that somehow the more you are considerate towards the afterlife, the more you actually enhance your own life here and now on this earth. It's almost like a boomerang that you throw towards the beyond, and it comes back to you, and it nourishes you. It's a good building, different than the other one. The most sensitive and the most graceful of Sullivan's tombs. Someone wrote, well, someone a little bit exalted even compared it with Taj Mahal. I think this is to exaggerate a little bit, but anyway. But the ornamentation of Sullivan receives my affection wherever it shows up. Really, these are embroideries in stone, if I can say so, and they are very beautiful. And without them, the building would be less. And this is the interior. Not bad. Sullivan had a very different sensitivity than Wright. But I should not forget Adler, the American engineer, because again, I love this. I have affection for this being in the shadow of the engineer. After all, he hired the other two, you know, and not the other way around. Okay, another tomb. This one, you know, very different compared with the other two. Well, the connoisseurs, the specialists, the experts say that all three buildings have been designed by Sullivan, but they were produced in the office of Adler and Sullivan. It was not even in the office of Sullivan and Adler. So I do think Adler there had a certain importance. His presence in the firm was not just formal. It's an interesting building. No. particularly like it here. So this work, like all the other works that you'll see in this first presentation, are signed and belong to the firm of Adler and Sullivan. Now, an opera house that had a set destiny that other buildings by Sullivan or Adler and Sullivan had, it burned down. It was an opera house in Colorado. It was a big building, the first big building, and it burned down. And you'll see some pictures of, now you see water, but you'll also see fire. So there was a flood there, but there was also a fire. You see the firemen here trying to extinguish. It was burned down. Quite a big building, and kind of you'll see a certain compositional way that Adler and Sullivan used, you know, kind of a, you know, massive building and then a tower. You see, well, this building doesn't exist any longer. We have these pictures and postcards. Yeah. The section here is, you know, maybe Sullivan had a more important role here than Adler, but who knows, actually. Grand Opera House. You see, the United States did the same thing that China does now. They build, China, as you know, builds opera houses because a country which wants to emerge or give the impression that is emerging towards the front of culture and of the present and even of the future builds paradoxically bourgeois buildings, because an opera, even if the opera is built by mad architects, is still its program is kind of bourgeois, you know. An opera is this. It's almost amusing, you know, that the United States in the 19th century wanted to have an opera, a grand opera house in a little place, you know, Pueblo. I mean, you can see what buildings are there around. You know, did it really need a big opera house, a grand opera house? The same with China, you know, they are mad about opera houses. Yeah. Now we arrive at one of their masterpieces, and you know, it's a very important building right in the heart of Chicago. I have seen it, and it's in all histories of modern architecture, including in the critical history of modern architecture by Mr. Frampton. So the auditorium building in Chicago is one of the best known designs of Louis Sullivan and Dan Coma Adler. Completed in 1889, the building is located at the northwest corner of South Michigan Avenue and Congress Street. The building, which when constructed was the largest in the United States and the tallest in Chicago, was designed to be a multi-use complex, including offices, a theater, and a hotel. As a young apprentice, Frank Lloyd Wright worked on some of the interior design. Can you imagine? I mean, you know, I don't know. It moves me when I think that Frank Lloyd Wright was there working with Sullivan in the same office. And anyway, we have a tendency to idealize the past. So, or maybe I do, but other people too, I guess. Maybe it wasn't all beautiful. And I know it wasn't, because from what I read, Wright began to steal clients from Sullivan. So then he was fired after 5 years. Even here, you see all kinds of ornamental details that make the building, you know, special in a way and interesting. There are books published about this book. It's about this building. It is a notorious building, but you see the the compositional attitude is kind of the same like in the Grand Opera House in Pueblo, a massive building with a tower. But it is to be remembered that it was at the time of its construction the largest building in the United States, and there were other very large buildings being built there. They had some very big commissions. So now a few words about Dagmar Adler. Was a German-born American architect and civil engineer. Funny, he's described as an American architect and civil engineer. He didn't study either, neither architecture nor engineering. Anyway, he's best known for his 15-year partnership with Louis Sullivan. So for 15 years they worked together, during which they designed influential skyscrapers that boldly address their steel skeleton through their exterior design. The Wainwright building in St. Louis, and you'll see it, from 1891, the Chicago Stock Exchange building, which was demolished from 1894, and the Guarantee building in Buffalo, New York from 1896, which is a masterpiece. And I will end my presentation with this very building, the Guarantee, or the Prudential building, as it is called, in Buffalo. Now you can see this is an image from a book, but it is a complex and big building indeed. It has the other spaces besides that ample, opera. Look, this is a huge space, but it has also smaller spaces. So also for musical events. You can understand the scale just looking at the size of the people when they are on the stage. So I read kind of amusing that Mr. Adler, the engineer, was famous as an acoustical engineer, but he couldn't quite explain why the acoustics were so good. So who knows? Maybe he didn't know so much. Maybe I don't know. He couldn't quite explain. Amusing. Well, let's say one could become an architect without training, but to become an engineer and an acoustics engineer, without any training is. I know I couldn't do it, but maybe some people could. It's huge. So it's 130 years old. Now, this should have been at the beginning. What a beautiful, let's say, first page on a possible book on the office, or Adler and Sullivan architects. You see the importance of ornamentation. I mean, there is a richness here, that, blank minimalism won't do, really. Maybe it's just nostalgia. Actually, I want to provoke you, the ones who are here, to do together with you, if you want, some event called Architecture Nostalgia. Because, for example, Enrique Norton, the Mexican architect who was present here on Zoom about 2-3 weeks ago, when a very interesting engineer from Los Angeles, and I don't know if he's here now, Bruce, invited him, and this is a very important Mexican, and not only Mexican, he builds also in the United States and in other parts. I've heard him in a conference saying, we must fight off nostalgia. But I think it's an interesting subject, architecture nostalgia. And maybe we can create an event together about it. Because nostalgia, yes, could be crippling, you could become melancholy and sentimental, but on the other hand, it could add something, you know, and so it could be both negative and positive. Now, the Chicago Stock Exchange, which was demolished in 1971, so 9 years after the demolition of that house that you saw, and this was also a big building. Of course, they had some photographs because in 1971 it was still, you know, the cameramen were all over. This detail might not have belonged to this building, but I like this picture, so I included it here. It's in St. Louis at the museum. This is a detail from a building by Sullivan, and you see the scale, and it's incredible. This is an elevator grill, or was, because the building was demolished. Just this fragment was kept alive and planted somewhere in the center of Chicago. I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, that's, you know, there are people that climbing a stair. I think it goes to the Art Institute of Chicago, but I could be wrong. Anyway, we are talking about the very heart of Chicago. This is how the building looked like, and it was demolished. I don't know exactly for what reason, but it was demolished. Another fragment from the building. So yeah, I'm thinking of initiating an event, architecture and nostalgia. A discussion essentially, but I invite any kind of, you know, maybe small presentations or to reflect on the theme, because I think it's important. Yeah, isn't it sad that now we just have this remnant of a great building? A great building, but the function itself, I don't know. I have a problem with stock exchanges, so to speak, especially with the one in New York City. I even launched a competition once to redesign the facade because it is a hypocritical facade, claiming that everything is fine, when in fact in a stock exchange, what happens, as you know, are just, you know, speculative transactions with money. The more, the better. Anyway, it's capitalism, and you feel it in Chicago. I lived in Chicago for 6 or 7 years, and I tell you, Chicago is a very impressive city architecturally, very different from New York, because in New York there is a lot of publicity, many advertisings, not in Chicago. In Chicago, you see the buildings unadorned, so to speak, with publicities or with advertising. So the buildings show themselves as they were conceived. This is fine, but still, when you contemplate the skyline of Chicago, the feeling I had was that all that nobility, all that impressive effort, and it was an impressive effort, and in a way, a great accomplishment in the field of architecture. But I felt that somehow the inner mechanism, that the engine that made all of this possible was actually money, the preoccupation with money. So I felt that at the bottom of it all, it was actually about money. It was not about spirituality or high emotions or I don't know what. It was about money. But when you look at the Taj Mahal, you do not think that that temple was made for money. No, it was a different raison d'etre for that building. And the same if you look at Chartres Cathedral. Of course, life was never pure, but capitalism somehow, even in its most astonishing results or achievements, somehow you feel that it's not a pure idealism behind all of it. Is actually something else. And that something else receives the word I just used, money. Now, a very fine building in St. Louis, the Wainwright building, and you saw the tomb of Mr. Wainwright. This is not maybe a glorious picture, but wait a minute, something is wrong here because this is still, I don't understand. This is still the stock exchange. Unless they are very similar. Could this be? I'm a little bit confused. No, something is wrong. This is the building in St. Louis. I guess that slide was misplaced, and I apologize. This is the building in St. Louis, and it's very similar to the one in Buffalo. A very important building for the evolution of the skyscraper. Is not yet a skyscraper. It's only, as I don't know, you can count the floors. It's not so tall, but it is a building, an office building that uses a rational or Cartesian structure that is was an innovation at its time. It's a very fine building, and it has at the cornice the detailed, the ornamental work of Sullivan that he was very famous for, but is not yet as developed as the building in this respect as the building that you will see next, the one in Buffalo, which is truly an amazing building, and I would call it a masterpiece. So this is how they built it. You see, in a way, they were not yet ready to get rid of a certain kind of historicism. You wouldn't expect with that kind of structure to have, you know, the dressing that the building shows in the lower, in its lower part. But it was moving in that direction. As for the ornaments, yes, they are surprising, and I'm very happy that Sullivan had this incredible talent for generating very intricate and complex forms of ornamentation. And you'll see in the Prudential building, or the Guarantee building, as it is called a few minutes from now. He used terracotta for these ornaments. You see that the plan is very, you know, so-called rational, but with towards the outside, well, it's still a rational building, but the ornamentation is bringing in something else. Fortunately, this was not demolished, although you would expect that anything can happen anytime. But this, by now, probably such a building has a status, so it cannot be touched. Now we arrive at the last building, and maybe the greatest that Adler and Sullivan built, is the Guarantee building in Buffalo, in New York, and is truly an incredible building. Even at the interiors, you know, you can see the very sensitive architectural embroidery, if I can call it so. And you know, it does matter, this embroidery, as I call it. It does matter. Otherwise, you know, we would have less sensitive interiors and exteriors, because you'll see the exteriors as well. It's something almost Islamic here, you know. There is a certain sensitivity at work here that comes, it seems, from somewhere else. I am thinking of the Celtic knots from old Celtic, because Sullivan had roots in that world, and yes, the labyrinth, and if you know the beautiful Celtic illuminations, they are very, very beautiful and very intricate, and somehow in this spirit.
Somehow the way these ornaments are assembled was, I don't know, reminds me of how it will be done in India and even Indonesia, because I've seen a lot of Javanese, the island of Java, Indonesia. We have these craftsmen doing wooden pattern like this almost something like that. I don't know. Probably a mixture of inspiration he got.
Yes, no, but this only shows that there are, you know, despite the many differences, there are also certain cultural leitmotifs, you know, if I can call them so. After all, we are all humans, you know, that you are born in Japan or in China or in India or in Greece or in the United States. There is something that unites all of us, and we should never forget this. Of course, there are differences, but there are also certain similarities. Not everything is foreign completely. And yeah, I can see why, you know, certain decorative patterns could appear in various cultures and at various times. Now, look here, you know, I would not tire to comment on this amazing corner of this building, which becomes a tree at the top, at the cornice, is amazing. Why did he do it? Because, you know, it's not easily noticeable from the, you know, the level of the street. I almost feel tempted to think that it's some kind of an homage, similar to the homage, architectural homage and artistic homage of the great artists of the, let's say, the Hindu temples or other temples who work for the glory of the divine, for they work for the gods or for God. And what was the reason that Sullivan so-called complicated his building in such a way at the most remote part of the building in relation with a passerby or with the man on the street? But I think exactly here he found the greatest joy, and the greatest creativity was found here. So I keep saying it, architecture is not just about space. You know, after all, the space in itself, like an abstraction, is not so impressive in this building, but is one of the most significant, you know, office buildings ever built. And is because, at least in part, because of the richness of such so-called details. And here it is almost as if Sullivan becomes almost anti-modern because the labyrinth, these architectural embroideries are not really modern in spirit at all. So he builds a rational structure, metallic structure, and then you see in the same building, and it's not the only building, you will see in the presentation about Sullivan, other buildings where he uses a funambulesque ornamentation. There is even a beautiful book, and actually I have it, a facsimile, you know, book with the ornaments. The ornaments of Sullivan are very, very interesting and very original. He didn't copy, you know, ornaments from the past. He created them, starting from considering natural principles. And look at this. In fact, I like so much this picture that I will also end this presentation on Adler and Sullivan with, so that you'll see this picture again. Because, yeah, it is, you know, it's something we don't do any longer, but maybe a bird would do, you know, the nest of a bird. I don't know, it's something of the natural world that makes this culmination of the column the way it is. Otherwise, the building, yeah, seen from afar, you say this is, you know, an office building, but the art of ornamentation is so original and so seductive that the building has other dimensions. It is an impressive building. It doesn't matter how you look at it, it is an impressive building. And again, the architectural embroidery has its meaning, and we cannot deny it. As for this corner, the apex in a way of the building is for me the pinnacle in a way of the building, that it's almost like a symbol of, it's metaphysical almost. It is very physical, but it's also in a way metaphysical. In the corner, this building becomes a tree, or wants to become a tree, at least at the level of idea and at the level of, you know, the physical or aesthetical suggestion. A very interesting man, Louis Sullivan, and an equally interesting man, Adler, because this was done in his office, in their office. And I really think they were both very special. Both Adler, the so-called American engineer with some elementary schooling, and Louis Sullivan. Beautiful, both of them. Because essentially they were dreamers. And we need to be dreamers in order to do great buildings. If they would have thought just about money and making money and pleasing the client, they would have never done something like this. This was done by two dreamers. And by the way, here Frank Lloyd Wright didn't have any word to say, so this belonged to Adler and Sullivan. Look at this picture, it's magnificent. It is very modern. It is almost like a church. It is an office building, but it's also in a way metaphysical. You know, this, of course, the picture was well chosen and with the clouds in the background. Anyway, I love this picture and I love this building. The inside is the inside. As you can see, the space is not so spectacular, but does it have to be very spectacular? There you can even see the model of the building inside the building. And we come back to this, to the glory of ornamentation, which sooner or later has to come back. And I see this ornamentation as a reflection of vita contemplativa, the contemplative life, because Adolf Loos actually had some very astute intuitions. Because if you remember in Crime and Ornament, or Ornament and Crime, he said it that when the Slovak peasant woman embroiders a sweater, she loses herself in that act of you know, crocheting the sweater. And it is exactly then when contemplation steps in and you begin to create things that are not necessarily so-called necessary. You know, so ornaments do have this function that they assert themselves, they show up, they appear then when we are a little bit so-called less awake. For example, if you go to a boring you know, meeting where you have to take notes, let's say in an auditorium in a school, in a university, and the professor is very boring, so you begin to sketch on the last page or pages of your notes book, you make scribbles, mandalas, all kinds of scribbles, just to kill time in a way. Those scribbles tell a lot about your psychic life, and they express a truth that is almost unconnected with what is written in the notebook in the other pages. In fact, I thought one day, but I will not do it because I don't have. But I think it could be done. Imagine a book where on the left page you show what one is supposed to take notes of, let's say at the course in a university, and on the right page what one draws or sketches or writes in the back of the notebook. That is to kill some time and to, you know, daydreaming in a way. This is daydreaming in the case of Sullivan, and I think we need daydreaming. Unfortunately, you know, then the grades will be accordingly harsh, and the professor will get mad and will ask you, what are you doing? And you will say, Well, professor, inspired by the Guarantee or Prudential building in Buffalo by Sullivan, I am doing some ornamental work, professor. Okay.
I was sent out of a classroom several times during my studies for scribbling.
I know. Professors get mad when someone scribbles, but there is so much beauty and inner and psychological truth in those scribbles. I believe in scribbles. Anyway, okay, so this is the great building, and we'll end this presentation on Adler and Sullivan with a masterpiece of modern architecture, but not just modern. I mean, look even at these lamps, you know, everything is designed and rich, and of course, this is my favorite. I love it, and I think it's the last image of the presentation on Adler. So let's all, you know, in one voice tell Dagmar Adler, happy birthday, Mr. Adler, and let's move on to Sullivan. No, I precipitated myself. I think I actually used that picture 3 times. I was sure I used it twice, but I think there is another, because the last one is that picture. So I guess I used it 3 times. Anyway, this is what happens when you love something, you don't mind if it happens a few times. You know, here all the data, the coordinates, Jesus, 42 degrees, 52, unbelievable. 13 floors, 46 meters height. Latitude and longitude. Anyway, the data. Did you notice if you watch on TV, let's say tennis, and they tell you the speed of the ball, you know, they take away, because we are so unaccustomed to taste something in emotional terms. We have to translate everything into numbers. Wow, it was a 140 miles, you know, the speed of the ball, or 126 or 79, or why do we have to measure everything in numbers? Why? Because behind them there is a trembling soul. That's why, and it's much easier to handle numbers than emotions. Okay, I think this is, unless I did it 4 times, this is the last image. Please, I should knock in wood. Yes, it was the last image. Okay, now if you are still patient with me, I'll show you Sullivan, and then for those who are truly who truly have stamina, to use the word someone used yesterday, I will show Frank Lloyd Wright in Oak Park. But now I'll show Sullivan, and it will be really a mini marathon, because I'll show all the work of Louis Sullivan. But I think it's important because we saw Adler and Sullivan, and now we'll see Sullivan, but we'll also see, and I'll go quickly, some works that I already showed that he did together with Adler. So he lived, he died at 68, and he died strangely. Usually architects don't die like this. He died alone, miserable and destitute in a hotel room. The great master, and he was truly great, because Louis Sullivan, together with Frank Lloyd Wright and with H.H. Richardson, are considered the fathers, the 3 geniuses of modern American architecture. He's immensely important, and fate was cruel with him. As I said, he died alone in a hotel room and destitute. A strange destiny for an architect. Architects don't usually have, you know, this such a harsh destiny. This is the man, and he also wrote beautifully. I truly recommend you a great book which is called Kindergarten Chats. He was a great writer as well. He was a great architect, but also a great writer about architecture. And I think he actually wrote better than Frank Lloyd Wright. So he was born on September 3rd. Of course, we'll talk about him again on September, called the father of the skyscraper. I don't know. He was one of the fathers of the skyscraper. He was also the infamous author of Form Follows Function. Although his former partner, Adler, I found out yesterday, wrote a paper, published a paper after they split, debating what Sullivan said. For Adler, form is not just following function, but follows other elements, other constraints, other attributes of the program that are more complex and hybrid. It's I didn't yet read that article that he published, but I think is worthy of reading it. Now, 1890 and 1922. I don't know, when I see the picture on the right, I think a little bit of Lucian Blaga, the Romanian poet. Anyway, he was an intense man and very fine intellect. Now look what he did. This is a building that exists in Chicago, and above this is the entrance at the corner. There is a rational, Cartesian building, very modern. But look what he did at the entrance. This is a bank. What will go? I go a little bit quicker because there is a lot of material to cover, and on one hand I don't want to bore you, on the other hand I want to be able to cover all of it. We'll come back to this. These are from his later works, some banks that he did in Iowa, and not just in Iowa. This is in Minneapolis. We'll come back to this, and they are exquisite. They are, in a way, jewels, architectural jewels. This you saw. This is a page from his book on ornaments. This is also from a bank, but we'll come back to it. This is just a quick collage of various images of his work. Sullivan deserves to be known very well, because not only he was the so-called the father of the skyscraper, he was also who, by misunderstanding in good measure, was implicated in the arrival of the deadly functionalists. But he was misunderstood because, again, what functionalist would create such an incredible phantasmagoric ornamentation? So obviously he was misunderstood, or he made himself misunderstood, because how could a man who says form follows function, after all, what is the function behind these ornaments? But there is a function, and I agree with the title of that book called The Function of Ornament. In the end, isn't beauty enough? Doesn't beauty give enough legitimacy to our architectural gestures? So as such, beauty itself is a function. Now it's a function of human life, of human aspiration. We'll come back to this. These are some banks, and maybe I constructed the PowerPoint presentation wrongly with this collage of, unless I have several presentations, maybe I chose the wrong one. With no, I'm not going to read this to you, but look, in 1896, Louis Sullivan wrote in a poem, "It is the pervading law of all things organic and inorganic, of all things physical and metaphysical, of all things human and all things superhuman, of all true manifestations of the head, of the heart, of the soul, that the life is recognizable in its expression, that form ever follows function." He's right, but you see, he also talks about the soul, the heart, the metaphysical, so it's not so simple. Someone called the architects who are very concerned with the tangible and neglect the intangible, he called them Darwinists or Pavlovians. Anyway, so I think form follows function, although it did become of the prevailing tenets of modern architecture or architects. very often it was actually misunderstood. So anyway, I'm not going to read this, but if you want, I can send you the PowerPoint presentation, and you can study, attentively if you want. Um, Maybe I should read a little bit. So he used terracotta, as we already saw. So I said Sullivan used it in his architecture because it had the malleability that was appropriate for his ornament. Probably the most famous example is the wreathing green ironwork that covers the entrance canopies of the Carlson. I never knew how to pronounce this, to my shame. Prairie Scott store, the one that you saw with the entrance in the corner, very ornamented. These ornaments, often executed by the talented younger draftsmen in Sullivan's employ, would eventually become Sullivan's trademark. To students of architecture, they are his instantly recognizable signature. And we saw the Guarantee building in detail. Okay. So we saw this building. I don't insist on it because we saw it when we talked about Adler. I want to arrive at some buildings that we didn't see yet. But this kind of big commissions, as I said, he didn't receive any longer after he split from Adler. And Adler himself didn't have success afterwards, although he associated himself with his two sons. And apparently it was because of his two sons, he wanted to bring in the office that there was some altercation between him and Sullivan. So then they decided to split. It happens. We saw this. This is the building where I said, it looks like almost like a Mendelssohn. It's not an expressionist building, but it's, you would expect this kind of building almost in Berlin or, I mean, even today, it's very modern. But that corner, the mezzanine and the first floor is hugely different because of the ornaments. It's a department store, a large department store. But look at the entrance. Yeah, these are architectural scribbles, but I think they are very beautiful and they testify about other preoccupation beyond what we usually call so-called function. Now this one, I will not insist. We saw this. I move forward quickly. This one we didn't see. It's Harold Bradley House in Wisconsin, where I think Frank Lloyd Wright had a bigger role, at least judging from the vigorous modernity in a way of the volumes. This one we saw. The auditorium building in Chicago, the great building. This section we didn't have in the other presentation, and I think it's worth spending a minute here to understand that it is indeed a big, I didn't actually know. So the offices of Adler and Sullivan were in the penthouse, so to speak, of the tower, there at the top. Very nice. Very nice that the clients allow them to have their own offices in their own building at the top level. That's nice. Okay, we saw this one. Did we? Yes. This one we saw as well. So these were done by Adler and Sullivan. I told you that they consider one of these three tombs as the Taj Mahal of St. Louis. I don't know. This one is not. Let us be realistic. It's not. But people like to dream, like to imagine, and we all have our own vanities and desires and so on. It's almost ridiculous to compare it to, I mean, sorry, you know, without disrespect, but how can you compare this with the Taj Mahal? This one I didn't show. Maybe it was done. Yeah, this was done probably just by by Sullivan himself. It's possible, but even here you see interesting ornaments insinuating themselves with some force that is beyond or insinuation. In fact, he also, it's clear he loved the Middle Ages, the Gothic time. This one we saw, and even that picture. I'm beginning to regret that I like that picture so much. This one we didn't see, and it's actually a nice picture. I suggest to you to if you are interested, if you like this aesthetics, to search on the web for Celtic knots and Celtic illuminations. They are very similar in spirit with what you see here, and they are very, very beautiful. In fact, this is a page from such a book. Okay, now we see buildings. So he did so 256 total commissions, unbelievable. So he was quite busy. This is a
How
building.
could someone with so many projects die in poverty?
Yeah, it's strange. Well, many of those buildings were done together with Adler, then they split. I don't know, that's how he died. Yeah, you wonder, but he was kind of unique in that sense. He did also works that are, you know, less glorious, you know. He, especially after he split from Adler, he accepted commissions. I also think he drank. I think he was alcoholic, I'm not sure. And even, you know, I think I read that sexually he was undecided, so to speak. And he was a complicated man. You know, I mean, complicated men can ruin a fortune if they put their mind to it, you know.
I mean, Louis Kahn also died not gloriously and was also not
exactly,
very decided on his women.
The wife of Louis Kahn, when he died, had to sell furniture from the office of Louis Kahn, and he was at that time the greatest architect in the world, but he died in debt. She had to, I read in a newspaper, when I arrived in the United States, she had to sell furniture and whatever drawings were still to be found in order to pay some of the debt that Louis Kahn left behind him. Now, you could wonder, you know, how come he was in debt? Well, one reason was that he was paying his employees overtime that the client didn't pay him. Maybe he also wasn't paid gloriously for the work in Bangladesh. At that time, Bangladesh was doing very badly, was a poor country. He studied the building, for example, the roof of the assembly hall in Dhaka. He studied in order to arrive at the right solution for 2 years. And in fact, there is an even somehow amusing story, maybe you know it, that when there was war between Pakistan and Bangladesh and the bombers flew over Dhaka, they didn't bomb the assembly hall, meaning the main building by Khan there, because they thought it was already bombed because it didn't have a roof. And he didn't have a roof because Khan didn't yet arrive at the solution he wanted to arrive. It took him 2 years. So in a way, there was luck in the fact that he was so slow in arriving. And actually, he did arrive at a beautiful solution, but only after 2 years. Yeah, he was poor. He was, you know, destitute. Not to speak that he also had two children outside of the marriage. Maybe some of the money also went there. I don't know. But he was poor. And it is surprising. We are talking about a major architect who did build. And yeah, it is strange. I don't know where the money of Mr. Sullivan went, but it's hard for me to believe that he drank all his fees like that. It's no, who knows? Maybe he lost it. I don't know, or invested it adventurously, and who knows? This one we saw. I want to insist. Really, it's mad what I'm trying to do here. You know, to cover such a rich and complex fragment, more than a fragment, chapter of the history of architecture in one afternoon, in one evening. But why not? We are adventurous. We like adventures. We are courageous. We are devoted. We have passion. This is the only building in New York, and it's worth seeing it. This one is ornated too. It's not so great like the others, but it's a little bit whitish. Anyway, it is in New York and it's doing fine. It was not demolished. It's still there. But I find it less successful than the one in Buffalo.
Can I interrupt with a question?
Please.
I mean, I'm really curious now. The material, you know, okay, earlier was brick or terracotta.
Terracotta. Yes.
So was this, when it was in the case of terracotta, was there a mold and there was some industrial production, or was this all handmade? And the same goes here. Because, you know, I mean, at this moment, there was industrial production was already possible. And of course, some aspects of this, of the modernity, or maybe versus arts and crafts is, of course, the mass production. So you have your mass-produced steel under construction there, but then the application of this rich ornamentation, I mean, from a financial standpoint, already back then, it must have been super expensive. So how was this achieved financially as well as craftsman-wise, or how was this produced? All this stuff. I mean, there's a certain repetition, but
yes. I mean, I don't know, but I imagine, yes, there were molds and there were modules, and there was a level of standardization, and there were just certain parts which were so-called unique. So I don't know exactly how he afforded to do something like this, but it was still 19th century. Maybe today it would be more difficult. I don't know. He did it. Other people didn't do it. Although in historicist styles, you know, ornaments were present. Maybe not at this level.
Yeah, because I mean, like as you said, I mean, it is covered from bottom to top completely, even at places where you don't appreciate it from a pedestrian level, or you know, maybe the opposite side in another building when you sit on the top floor, then you can see it. But you know, to convince somebody to do something like this, to pay for it, is, if this is not cost efficient, it sounds like.
Or maybe Florian, this response to the question of Taliana, you know, maybe that's where his money went. I mean, I don't know.
He put his own money into it.
Yeah, it's possible. It's possible. You know, when you love something, you know, you pay. I mean, I don't know, but Daliana's question is legitimate. You know, how come?
No. Of course, you know, no question. I mean, we also put a lot of money in our designs because maybe we sometimes do not get paid enough. But this is one thing: putting your office money into more work of people to achieve a better solution versus actually paying for the building yourself.
Right. Anyway, now, but his ornamentation is incredible, and you know, doesn't matter how you look at it, it's still very impressive.
Yeah, actually, for sure, yeah. That's the reason why it makes me even more wonder. Is this gypsum or?
Pardon?
Is this gypsum the white material here, or what is?
Well, it's an exterior. I don't know.
Because gypsum wouldn't hold, but it looks
right.
I need to look it up.
Right. Okay, commercial loft, Gage Brothers. By the way of Gage, if you don't forget, please check out the name Mark Foster Gage, who is a young, kind of youngish architect in today, who teaches at Yale University, and who you can find on YouTube a dialogue between him and Patrick Schumacher that is very interesting. I mean, really, you see a North American and the German, and they are so full of temperament. In fact, they have at times a violent fight. You think they are from Sicily. I mean, I love this about Patrick Schumacher. He really, he was trembling with fury at times when Mark Foster Gage talked. So you can see if you type in on YouTube Gage and Schumacher, you'll see it's a long dialogue between the two, I think, at the University of Texas. It's a very interesting dialogue they had. Anyway, this is a different Gage. So this is the building. You see, the building is kind of banal, but at the top, you see the ornaments, two ornaments by Sullivan. He couldn't resist to. He did even a Holy Trinity Russian Orthodox cathedral and rectory. So he did it after he separated from Adler. I don't know, but yeah, he built a small church for the Russian community in Chicago, or where? Yeah, in Chicago. Why not? It's not easy to build for the Orthodox religion at all, but he did it. Now we saw this building and with that incredible entrance in the corner with that labyrinthical. It's a famous department store in Chicago. Now, Virginia Hall, I think this one I couldn't find pictures. Sorry, a building in Iowa. Again, you can tell he was probably also depressed. Maybe he was already in that hotel room, destitute hotel room, doing these buildings without glory, but there is a glimpse at his former self in the little ornaments at the top. Although he did some little exquisite banks, and we'll end with them, truly very beautiful. But the ornaments are still very, very nice, and yeah, the building is maybe not so nice, but the ornament still is very sensitive. A church. Again, you can tell it's Sullivan. You have a massive, approximately massive, a bigger, bulky building, and then a tower. This is more modernistic, less adorned, not adorned. It reminds a little bit of the early work done with, the opera, Grand Opera in Pueblo that we saw. No, he had commissions. I mean, he was famous. He was a famous architect, but his last few years, he collapsed financially and otherwise. I think I read that also Frank Lloyd Wright helped him a little bit or visited him, or I don't know. The music store, it's a little musical store. He just did the elevation, the facade, but it's interesting, the facade by itself, convincing, and is indeed Louis Sullivan. So again, it is hard to believe that this is the man who said form follows function. banks, these beautiful little banks. So by the end of the first decade of the 20th century, Sullivan's star was well on the descent. Somebody wrote this, I took from somewhere, but it was, and for the remainder of his life, his output consisted primarily of a series of small bank and commercial buildings in the Midwest. Yet a look at these buildings clearly reveals, according to whom somebody wrote, anyway, it's probably from Wikipedia, that Sullivan's muse had not abandoned him. When the director of a bank that was considering hiring him asked Sullivan why they should engage him at a cost higher than the bids received for a conventional neoclassic style building from other architects, Sullivan is reported to have replied, 1,000 architects could design those buildings. Only I can design this one. So he was not very modest either, or maybe he was drunk at that time. Anyway, he got the job. And these buildings are called the jewel boxes. So today these commissions are collectively referred to as Sullivan's jewel boxes. All still stand. So the National Farmers Bank in Owatonna in Minnesota from 1908. I almost felt like saying a bank doesn't deserve to be so sensitively done, but I guess I'm wrong. I mean, it could have been, you know, some kind of a temple for a new religion, but it's a bank. And the inside is nice too. It's not just outside. And again, the ornaments save him. And there are ornaments also done differently. They are very beautiful. And inside, you know, it's quite a bank. It's a humane place. I don't know. You could even have some kind of, I don't know. Maybe it's not good to have such a bank because you get carried away by sentimentalism or sentimentality and write wrongly in those papers what you are supposed to write. But yesterday, somebody who participated told us that Michelangelo was very astute in handling the financial matters. So why not also have a sensitive bank done in this way, risking a little bit of losing your mind while you do the financial transactions, the prosaic transaction. Apropos of this, I recommend you to read. There is a little poem by the great French poet Charles Baudelaire, where there is a conversation between someone and the poet, and that someone asks him, "What do you love the most?" And he's asked, "Do you love your father, mother, your brother, sister?" Anyway, in the end, he's asked, "Do you love gold, meaning money?" And he says, that is Charles Baudelaire, he says, "Je le haïs comme vous haïsez Dieu." I hate it in as much as you hate God. In other words, for Baudelaire, money and God are dichotomical. So he said, I hate it, I hate gold, I hate money, I hate it in as much as you, the one who asked me the question, you hate God. And at the very end, it's a short poem in prose and it's very beautiful. So he's asked again, "So you strange man, what do you love the most?" And he says, "I love the clouds, là-bas, the moving clouds." That's how it ends. Anyway, a poet. We should not listen to poets. We should listen to bankers. Another great little bank, you know, very, very nice. And actually something like this in red was done recently, really, in London. Maybe you know it. It's a little building near the theater built by Dennis Lasden. But here the brickwork is still exquisite, although less adorned. It's a good building. It shows that Sullivan was a master. A dreamer, you can tell. Obviously, he didn't handle well his money matters. Otherwise, he wouldn't die like that in a hotel room. And now, of course, the entrance into the building is blocked of his, was it like this? Another building in Iowa, in Algona, the Henry Adams building, an even smaller bank. Now, when you look at the prosaic buildings on the left and on the right, you know, it's the drama of the context, you know. You can tell he's accepting commissions now in environments. When you think about the big buildings that he designed in the center of Chicago, and now but still, as it was mentioned, is a talented, sensitive architect who tries his best to do a building that is not banal, that is and deserves the name of architecture, the word of architecture, of being architecture. This one also in Iowa, Merchants National Bank. This is splendid, actually. I don't know about those golden, maybe they were not like this at the time when he projected them, nor do I know about those two benches. But this shows up in most histories of modern architecture because it is a fine Louis Sullivan building. Essentially, it is a box, but because of these so-called unnecessary details at a large scale, though, at an urban scale, the building becomes something else, becomes significant, becomes rich. See the meaning and the force and the power and even the symbolism in a way of the ornamental work. I almost feel like saying a bank doesn't deserve such beauty, but I'm probably wrong. Inside probably was also modified. I don't know. It looks like it was modified. You can still see some stained glass windows and the lamp. Unfortunately, there is this annoying Alami thing that shows up on all pictures taken from them. Another bank in Ohio, more grayish, but still Sullivan. And the ornaments are his way of saying that beauty is still possible on this earth. Even from a hotel room, the old home. Yeah, this is the cover of a book on him. And we are approaching the end. This is another bank in Lafayette, Indiana. Truly a little bank, but when you think about it, it is a little Sullivan building, and that's very nice. A state bank, truly a small building, you know, but it is a little jewel in a way. The cars, of course, are running to the left and to the right, kind of indifferent to it, but this is another bank. And People's Federal Savings, we are really very close to, and in Sydney, Ohio, from 1918. Not all of them are as inspired as some of his best, but yeah, it's possible that he drank, and you know, alcohol doesn't have a good effect on people in the long run at all.
Does he only do like opulent buildings? Does he also do social housing and other stuff which are more, you know?
No, he didn't. I don't know of. No, he didn't, with the exception of the Chanley House in Chicago. No, I don't think he did. But in the United States, there wasn't a great tradition of social housing. This is more Europe, you know, not in the United States. Even now, they don't. No.
Regarding
North American individualism.
Regarding his demise, actually, I just read on Wikipedia, and and I wanted to wait until the presentation was over. However, I can see that they were probably right, because it said that after his split with Sullivan, he actually began the spiraling down, a 20-year spiraling down, and he actually drank. He was an alcoholic, and that was actually known. and he was destitute due to the fact that he received less projects. And you can see here already, because after he built so many interesting buildings and bigger than these banks, I'm starting to kind of believe it. He also split from his wife, so there were many other things that might.
Yes, but even these buildings, which are not very big, but still an architect who builds, such buildings should be able to, go through life, comfortably. I don't know. Yes,
Maybe he lived on on a different scale, and he was used to different certain needs. Yeah, standards.
But I would like to add to that. I mean, look, if you have a certain level, right, and especially in this capitalist world where the only paradigm is growth, you need to grow more, you need to grow better. So look at it as like models or actors or whoever, they have their peak in their career. And then when the peak is over, because they turn old and wrinkly and nobody cares about them anymore that much. I mean, a lot of these people have problems of going on, because they sort of want to remain in their former bathe in their former glory. And maybe, I mean, it's understandable, right? Maybe he sort of, could not keep up with the times. Adler was more of a business partner maybe and brought the big projects, and he couldn't do it on his own. So he went into decline and just had a problem with it, accepting it or changing focus within his career. So it happens to a lot of people. I mean,
right. Yeah. No, but his story is known as being a tragic one, and considering his fame and his importance in architecture, is maybe not a unique case, but almost unique. But still, he made these jewel boxes that are, I mean, would make an architect proud, anywhere in this world now, if you would still be able to create something like this. But we are talking here about a truly major architect. Sullivan, as I said, is considered, together with Wright and Richardson, one of the three, so-called geniuses of North American architecture, the founding fathers in a way. So a very important architect. It's nice, this picture in the winter. The snow was collected just by his building and not the one near it. Okay, that's it. And I don't know if you still have patience. I could show you Frank Lloyd Wright in Oak Park. If you are tired, we can stop here. You decide.
Yeah, let's go on.
Should I show Frank Lloyd Wright in Oak Park? I only show him in Oak Park because it connects in a way with, what I mentioned, that he worked for Adler and Sullivan, and then he was fired by Sullivan. This is what I read. He was fired because he began to steal the clients and do the jobs just himself in the evening at home. A home he built actually with money received from Sullivan. So, and you will see the home and the studio of Frank Lloyd Wright that he built in Oak Park. In Oak Park is like it's a suburb of Chicago, and there are, I don't know, 15, 17 buildings by Wright, almost one near the other. So it's extreme density of buildings by Wright there because he lived there. And he was young, he was ambitious, and it shows. I even forgot where I photographed this picture, but I forgot where it is in Oak Park. It's of course Wright and a little note on Park district of Oak Park from 1981. So Mr. Wright lived for 92 years. So different from Sullivan and even more different from Adler. So from 1889 to 1909, Oak Park is home to the world's largest collection of Frank Lloyd Wright designed building with 25 structures. I thought there were a little less anyway. And this text says 25 structures built by, and it's possible some were demolished, built between 1889 and 1913. It was in our village, well, this is a proud person from Oak Park, that Wright developed and perfected his signature prairie-style architecture, emphasizing the use of interior light and open spaces in low, earth-hugging buildings, an emotional language, earth-hugging buildings. His designs changed the course of 20th century architecture. Many of the Wright houses and buildings in Oak Park and River Forest are registered national landmarks. Okay, so here is a little, map, but we shouldn't study it now. But if you plan to go to Chicago, it's worth going to Oak Park. Now we see a building on Chicago Avenue. This extraordinary building in Oak Park, Illinois, was the Wright family residence from 1889 to 1909. So for 20 years, Wright lived there with his wife and his children after he married Catherine Tobin using $5,000 borrowed from Louis Sullivan, as I said. So the Wright family, Frank and Catherine and their 6 children, lived here while he developed his architectural practice, creating what became the prairie style of architecture. Now, these men, like Bach, had many children and also created, a lot of great buildings. Like Bach in terms of musical compositions. What composer today would afford 20 children, as Bach had, with 2 wives? Yes. Well, and besides doing architecture a lot, Frank Lloyd Wright, and besides having a family and 6 children, he also had affairs. He seduced the wives of his clients. This man was all over the place. Robert Parker House from 1892, but we'll arrive at the houses in detail. So maybe I shouldn't read now all the text here. And I don't like to read while. But it says here that the triple of houses on Chicago Avenue, just west of Wright's home and studio, stand out for their transitional nature from the rest of Wright's later designs. They have come to be called the bootleg houses, as they were designed by Wright while he was still working at the firm of Adler and Sullivan, who forbade him to take outside commissions, hence their bootleg appellation. I don't know what bootleg means, but yes, there was a conflict there, and the conflict culminated with Wright being fired. So this is his home, and this is how it is now, and this is how it was when he lived. And his studio is on the left, and it's an interesting building, and it's interesting because it was his home, but also his office. So he did have an office, which was very nice. And then you have these sculptures that adorn the building. And of course, it's not the ornamentation of Sullivan, it's something else. But even Wright, who was more austere in a way, not in terms of handling the space, but in terms of ornamentation, still accepted or invited sculptures to be part of the building. This was before restoration. I visited this building.
I visited too.
Who said it?
Izazar.
You did. Okay, maybe you should talk about it then, because I don't remember a lot.
Well, it was a long time ago, and I remember the top room which he designed it for the family. It was quite a light, spacious, long room.
Yes.
With a fireplace in it. And at the bottom, I think the shop part of the office is not now a shop. It's open to the tourist. Yeah, I mean, it is typical of his planning where he plays with the concave and convex spaces, small and, labyrinthine going to from smaller space into larger space and narrower space and wider spaces is very much like that. So it's quite engaging. Yeah, it's nice house.
Oh yes,
Basically,
very
yeah,
much so.
it's
No,
very
no.
nice house. Yeah.
As opposed to Sullivan, he was not a masochist. He loved life, and life loved him. I mean, he had problems with fire, but he was indeed a man of many hats. There is such a book with such a title, A Man of Many Hats. He was incredible at negotiating with, for example, in this building, there is a room where he was receiving his clients. And at one point, at least, he had the walls painted in gold. There was a gold with a certain patina. So it was not really vulgar. And he was asked, why did he do it? And he said, because I wanted to give the impression that I'm doing very well. So the clients, when they came in and they saw the golden walls, they would say, wow, this man is doing well, and so they were encouraged to commission him. So
it's interesting because he wasn't doing, I mean, at earlier stage, he wasn't doing well. I thought he was very poor.
Who was very poor?
Yeah, to a point that his wife would send his children to his office asking in front of the client, asking for money.
Well,
and he wouldn't have the money.
Well, would a very poor person have such a house?
No. By that time he had made it, but earlier than that he wasn't.
No, well, when he was very young, we are talking about a man who was 25 or so. He was almost, out of college. That college he never attended. So he was very young. He borrowed $5,000 from Sullivan, but he built an opulent house. I mean, look at the house, This is not a cheap house, He didn't live in an apartment building or in a studio.
Did he not have a big debt?
Pardon?
Did he not have a big debt?
I don't know, but he was doing okay. Wright was doing okay. Yes, sometimes he had some problems later in life with money. I read that he was paying his employees with Japanese woodcuts when he wouldn't have the money, but that's because he was spending like crazy. He was a collector. He collected art. He loved everything beautiful. So like Balzac, he would invest in beauty even if he didn't have the money. So of course then he had to borrow, but he was doing well, right?
Did you showed an image earlier on to begin with? It was of his grave. Was it with the sculpture on top?
No, I don't think his grave was there. That was just like a commemorative stone, but it was outside of a park. I don't know, maybe at the entrance in Oak Park, or I don't know where his grave is. And actually his grave, he says, sharing with his third or fourth wife. No, I think with his third wife, his last wife. I think he was married only 3 times. And there was some scandal about it because his last wife wanted her ashes to be mingled with the ashes of his ashes, and some people protested to this. But anyway, it happened because she was the legitimate one at that point.
I remember reading that she actually kind of opened his grave and took his body out. And if you go to his grave now, it is open, it's empty.
Well, from what I know, he was, there was no body, there were ashes. Her ashes have been mingled with his. I don't know. I mean, there are all kinds of stories because, as Frank Lloyd Wright, and he encouraged scandals. And I imagine even after death, He even spent a day, night in prison because of it. And he had all kinds of strange happenings in his life. But he lived to the fullest, really. I mean, big family life, you know, good number of children, lots of houses, lots of projects, affairs, you name it. He lived. He didn't say no to life. He said yes to life to the fullest. I don't know how he was able to do all of this, but he was. Anyway,
A lot of people working for him. Since we're discussing right now, I just want to add what my question before with Sullivan and the materiality. So it is indeed cast terracotta, and the white ones is glazed terracotta. So it was mass produced.
It was mass produced.
Yeah, in a certain moment, repetitive, right? So I mean,
Yes,
nonetheless, I mean, the amount of molds you have to produce for doing so is still staggering, and the craftsmanship for making these molds. But you know, nonetheless, there was an industrial production behind it.
Yes.
Just to finish this.
Thank you, Florian. So this is not how a poor person lived, and he was less than 30. I mean, you know, when I think about young architects today, you know, that they are in New York or in somewhere else, you know, struggling in a little studio, barely being able to pay the rent, and look
but Dan, all these people working for him, they probably lived like all the students, you know. I mean,
well, yes, but he still had to pay them a salary, you know.
Yeah, but I mean, look, at that time, the level of salary and the difference between, you know, the boss of a studio and your employees was probably much higher than it is nowadays in Europe and in North America, right?
Yeah, but again, we are talking here about a young architect who had to borrow money to build his house. So he was very young. He was not yet, you know, the established. But he took risks. He borrowed money from the bank. He borrowed money from his boss. He got fired, but he had an incredible capacity to handle human affairs. You know, very, you know, he was very astute and very, I mean, it really shows he was a capable man. He had his high standards artistically, but he also was able to handle prosaic matters very well.
Yeah, no. Look, I'm not arguing against that one at all. And I think, you know, he's quite capable of finding money and spending the money and spend the money on probably a strategic PR representation of showing that he himself is a successful architect in order to get more clients. I'm not saying that. What I'm trying to say is, like, he is one outstanding example probably of thousands of architects and designers at his time who did not make it, right? And they were living in poverty. He wasn't, of course, he was the one outstanding, but I would just argue that the life of draftsmen and people doing actually drawing all up this work is probably similar to, you know, poor interns in big offices right now. Probably not much change there.
Yeah, but he was himself one of those draftspersons when he worked for Adler and Sullivan. Do you think when he was hired based on he was probably 20, no more than 20, he himself started very low. So
yes, I agree. And he made it out of it because of talent and intelligence and
money.
And
that
money, yes.
money really means a lot.
Pardon?
I think. I wonder if he ever pays it back, the borrowed money from Louis Sullivan, because I mean, how could he come out of draftsmanship and you know, being a junior architect, suddenly having such a house and actually an office of his own, which with stolen clients actually.
Taliana, this house was built in stages. It was not what we see now is it's in its last final stage. It was developed in time. It didn't have some parts. Maybe this octagonal room didn't exist at the beginning. Plus, he began to have clients because he stole the clients from Adler, and if he did a few houses, in a few months, he got the money. So he had the clients. So he transformed the house as he grew. We see now the house as in its most accomplished phase, but it was not always like this. Anyway, he was an able man, and he was also, in the right place at the right time. It is what it is. Khan, I never saw where Khan lived, but I don't think Khan had a house for himself. Certainly not something like this. Where did Carlos Carpa live? I have no idea. He probably lived just like Sullivan in a hotel room. I don't know. But here we have a different kind of creator. He wouldn't miss having a piano in the house. He had to have a piano. And look at that. This is the family room for children. And that, as Ar mentioned, it's God, it could be a church. And even the Nike sculpture there. He was doing well, what can we say? Anyway. But as you probably know, students and people working for him at times called him frankly wrong, because maybe he was also abusing them and sometimes talking nonsense, and what can you do? He had genius, no doubt, but he probably had things that were less noble. Anyway, there was idealism in him, and you can see even these sculptures, their symbolism I do not know, but I imagine there is a certain symbolism. A modest man he was not. In fact, he declared, early in my life, I had to choose between being honestly arrogant or hypocritically modest. And I chose to be honestly arrogant, and I found there was no reason to change. So in a way, I understand. You see, initially the house was smaller, and then he built, he kept adding because his family grew. But yeah, you needed money for something like this, of course.
There's also something else between, dishonestly modest and arrogant. There's simply like being confident and.
Yes, he was very confident.
No. If you're arrogant, you're not confident. If you're arrogant, you're do as if you are confident, and you just try to hide that you're not. If you're confident, then you know what you can do. So hopefully he was able at a certain moment in his life to transition from bluffing arrogance into confidence.
Well, he made this statement later in life, but I think he was aware. Maybe some people told him that he was arrogant. I don't. Anyway, we are talking about one of the major forces in modern architecture and architecture of all time. So we are not talking about a minor architect here. How many people of his stature were and are in the history of architecture? Not many. But there were other great architects who lived much more modestly, and I'm thinking of Mackintosh, for example, or I'm not even mentioning Sullivan. He was in a way a special case. And what is amazing is that he also lived life very adventurously and even immorally, the Puritanistic North American would say. He had problems because of this. If he fell in love for a woman, he would go for it. It didn't matter to him that he was married and that she was married. In fact, the woman he loved very much, who died in the fire at Taliesin East, she was married and she had 2 children, and her children were visiting her while Frank was in Chicago. So a man in their service at Taliesin East set the house in fire. To this day, is not known why. And then when people try to run away from the house, cut their heads off at the door. So he lost the woman he loved and her two children. They were not his children, but her children. So there were tragedies in his life, you know. But he went for this. If he loved a woman, it didn't matter to him. She was married, and he was married. He would go for that love, and you know, he with all the consequences. Many people would not do this, you know, would restrain themselves. He didn't. He didn't restrain himself. Well, there was a level of irresponsibility, of course, and he was punished by the American society. About 10 years, he didn't receive commissions, or not too many, and that's when he studied Broadacre City, because he had all the time at his disposal, because the Americans would consider him immoral and wouldn't give him commissions, or not as many as he was used to receive. But he was still able to, you know, to, I don't know, he was always able to come out of it, as opposed to Sullivan. I mean, this is just a little house in Oak Park, but then he built the big campus at Taliesin East, and then the even bigger campus at Taliesin West. So we are dealing here with a man who had, you know, a standard of living that was not common, really. But he borrowed a lot of money. I read he was continuously in debt, but he was able to pay back because he had many commissions. Now here are the tourists wandering, looking at his buildings with funny American bicycles. I don't like American bicycles. I like Dutch bicycles, and even Indian and even Chinese bicycles. Not American bicycles are badly designed.
I like American bicyclists on Dutch bikes in Amsterdam. They're funny because they fall constantly over their bikes because they're not used to biking.
Thomas van Leeuwen said, I mean, he's an interesting, I don't know, what is he, Florian? I mean, an architecture lecturer, if we may say. Theorist,
historian?
Historian?
Historian, yes.
Well, he said that, I mean, looking at people using a, you know, a head protector on a bike, that makes any Dutch laugh, because, I mean, riding a bike is as natural as walking for the Dutch people. That's what he said.
Do you know that Thomas was a bike sports profi in his younger years, professional?
I didn't know that.
No, he was a cyclist.
So, sorry, Dan, we're using this to chat. I'm so sorry.
But it would be a nice guy to talk to for you. Maybe we can invite him once. He's a very nice guy. If I hope he's still alive. But okay.
Now we go to a different building, which I showed in another presentation. The Unity Temple here, it is covered in, you know, for reconstruction. For I don't know why that picture was there, but we'll arrive at the Unity Temple, which is not far away from this house. Here is a picture with his enlarged family before he deserted his family, his wife and his 6 children. So Frank is on the right, and then his wife with a newborn, and I don't know who are those people. They are mentioned here: Uncle Jenkins, aunt, sister Jane, wife Catherine, son Lloyd, who became an architect. So the little baby became an architect. He does look a little bit like an architect. I don't know, I'm joking. Cousin Mary, mother Anna, sister Maginelle, and Frank himself. So here is a man, I believe me, if I had such a family, I would be unable to draw one single line. And, you know, he built building after building after building. Yes, he probably was a hard worker. I mean, with all the help from other people, he was working hard. Anyway. They even play tennis. I see the Aunt Susan something, you know, a racket, no, a tennis racket. Here he is with his wife. I mean, his wife for about 20 years or so. They married in 1889. Then he got tired of her and married someone else. Yeah. Oh, Frank. And here are the 6 children, all of them. Yeah, one was a landscape architect, Lloyd, the little baby that we saw, and an attorney, and the wife is, no, Catherine is not his wife. I'm confused here. No, it should be his wife. It doesn't say his wife, it says just wife. Also, there is another architect there, Kenneth, also Lloyd, and the building products dealer and arts and crafts administrator. Anyway, well, this is a funny picture. Of course, the scale is not correct. It's a photoshopping thing, I guess. Anyway, so, well, he was not so pious, obviously. I don't know why this pious sculpture is there, but he was not. Unity Temple, a fine building, but to me, without much spirituality, but it's highly considered in the history of modern architecture. I talked about it before. It is in Oak Park as well. It's not a, I wouldn't call it a, I don't know how the Unitarians, he had in his family a very important uncle who was some kind of a prophet, a bigger than life figure for Unitarians. And that's maybe how he got the commission. I'm not familiar with this denomination, but it is a temple. It's not a church, and it's not mysterious inside. It's not. There is no sacred light really. It's more like a gathering place, but it's very well built and it's convincing, yeah, as an architecture. But could very well be a cultural center or something. Anyway. I have been inside here, and I cannot say that I trembled with emotion, you know, feeling or seeing God. No, I didn't. But, you know, it's a large gathering place and very well designed, yes. No mystery here, really.
It's very monumental, no?
Yes, it is.
I mean, sorry to say, it's almost fascist.
If that's what you wanted to say.
No,
okay.
no, not. But I mean, if I look at the Königsplatz in München, the buildings, the Nazi buildings, you know, yeah. Somehow, I don't know.
It is very cold space, and it's very hugely masculine. It doesn't have any kind of softness and warmth.
So you visited Azar, no?
Yes, I have. Yes.
Yeah, it is as you said. Yes.
It's just kind of very heavy building. When you look at the outside, the elevations is kind of unfriendly.
Like a bunker, no?
I kind of like it in a way that it is a great piece of art, but it doesn't do anything in a way, you know. It's not welcoming. It provokes the curiosity of why it is like this. But if you're not kind of into art or architecture, you just kind of are left cold with it.
I think this wording there would have been differently put, for the service of God and the worship of man. No, really. You know that Frank Lloyd Wright was asked, what about God? Do you believe in God? And he said, I do, but I spell it nature. But in this building, maybe even that is not truly easily observable or noticeable. Although the drawing kind of nice, but you see the plans that are shown in on the elevation of the drawing are not really showing up on the building. Or then maybe this has to do with the administrator of the building and not with the architect. They had problems like with other buildings by right. They had to invest heavily to restore it. Falling water too. When I visited it, you know, they were collecting money because the building was very affected by the falling water. So these great masters of modern architecture didn't always build very carefully. That's the truth. La Tourette, also by Le Corbusier, also Villa Savoy. I mean, you look at a building of Palladio, which for hundreds of years resisted quite well. And here you have a building that was not so old, really, you know, 50 years old, or, you know, and still needed, you know, an extensive repair work. And the school in Cincinnati by Peter Eisenman, you know, 20 years after it was built, it needed a total, you know, refurbishment and repair, and it was in 20 years it became almost a ruin. So we are not building any longer. I mean, some of us, some of the architects today, and some very famous, do not build well, because in their quest for a special space, you know, they neglect some basic requirements of how to build, and you know, that's a problem. Frank Lloyd Wright.
But I think you raise an interesting point here, Dan, if I may interfere. But this is also a point, I think, which I think is very interesting to see your lectures and your admiration for somebody like Wolf Prix and sort of this extraordinary forms. And
I didn't no, I think you got it wrong. I never, in fact, I wrote violently against him, and I can send you the essay tonight after the lecture.
Yes, please send
Nobody wrote as violently against Wolf Prix as I did. I'll send it to you tonight, and not just about him.
Okay, please send it to me. I would love to see it.
I will send you between 40 and 50 essays that I wrote against, all of them are called apropos of Wolf Prix or Kop Himmelblau's lecture, apropos of Zaha Hadid's lecture, apropos of Daniel Lipskin's lecture, apropos of Peter Eisenman's lecture. And I was violently against them, but I'm not sure I was totally right. But at that time, when I wrote them, I was truly, in a way, a different man. You know, you know what I used to do? I was mad. I was going at Columbia at their lectures, and there were 1 or 2 lectures a week. Bernard Tschumi, when he became dean, he invited these people to, you know, the most famous and the most extravagant to lecture there, all of them, really. All the deconstructivists, and Jacques Derrida came to, and Jean Baudrillard, and you name them, they all came. And after the lecture, I would go home, and with a very simple and modest typewriter, because there were no computers at that time, I would type a reaction to their lectures. And when the next one took place, I would be there, and anonymously, I was printing them, like 100 copies of my essay, and I would sign it plus minus Ion, and I would distribute them anonymously. I would put some in the elevator, some on the steps of the staircase, some in the toilet room, some in the auditorium, and nobody knew who wrote them. And I had the pleasure, but there was also some kind of a sad pleasure. I was sitting there in the darkness of the auditorium of the Avery Hall, and I was, you know, sometimes I've heard the student, go quickly in the toilet room under the sink. There is still, you can still find the copies of the essays. Or I saw one day Bernard Tschumi reading one of these manifestos that I wrote, which were very, very critical. And I knew which one, because I knew which one I so-called published or distributed on that day, was on Antoine Prédoc. And after he read it, he threw it away like it was garbage, like it burned his hand. Yeah, and Frampton told me later on that they thought there was some kind of so-called brilliant student who was very critical of the new stars and so on. So yeah, I know I also changed in the meantime, maybe dramatically, but you are also hearing now a man who wrote violently against them, so against Wolf Prix as well. I will send you tonight after this presentation, and we'll end soon. I will send you, and I could send them to anyone who is here. But
yes, please, we would like to have them.
yeah, but you might not show up at my presentations because I was so critical. In fact, 2 or 3 years later, when I did like a presentation by Bernard Tschumi, I went to him to shake his hand, to congratulate him. It was a different building, which I liked. And he didn't know who I was. So I said, I am the plus minus ion, because that's how I signed those, essays, so to speak. And he said, yeah, and he was surrounded by a group of people. He said, this man, he wrote violently. I didn't care that he criticized me, but he criticized everybody. And it's true. I had very apocalyptic visions about, this was at the end of the millennium, and there was a malaise in New York, and there was also a malaise within me that I was not aware of. So I was actually deconstructing my own life, and I had all kinds of problems that I was not aware of, so I projected them in them. Yeah, I'll send them to you, sure. Azar, you'll receive them. Daliana will receive them. Florian will receive them. And if anyone...
I'd like them too.
Okay, Anna, sure. But please don't post them on Facebook, please.
No, I won't.
No,
I won't.
I think, Dan, I
Rest
think
assured.
you should post them. I think you should put them all in your website, Icarch. It will attract a lot of crowd. And why not? I mean, you have...
Okay, Daliana, after you read a few of them, please tell me afterwards what you think, because now you don't know. Andrei, if he's still here, he knows some of them because I sent them to him. Anyway, let's come back to Unity Temple. But at that time, I felt like I was some kind of a Zorro in architecture. I had this, really, you can laugh, Florian, it's totally...
No, I like the metaphor.
No, but it's true, that's what I felt. I felt like I was like Ishmael in the Bible, and his hand was against everybody's hand, and everybody's hand was against his. That's how I felt, and I was totally miserable and isolated, and maybe, anyway, you'll read the essays, they are terrible. Absolutely terrible. Anyway, but Andrei, if he's still here, he actually said that maybe I was not totally wrong there. I was violently against the deconstructivists. You'll read. Okay.
Oh yeah, then we have something in common, I guess.
Okay. Well, you might change too if you keep showing up at these presentations. You might tell one day, Daliana, sorry, I have to go to see some deconstructivist buildings in Europe and the United States. Sorry, you take care of the business. I have to see this.
No, it won't happen. Don't worry.
Okay. Well, then, okay, this is a house. So now we are back in the Oak Park. I mean, we're still in the Oak Park, but with that temple. So we'll see a few more houses from Oak Park, from those 25. I don't know if there are 25. I only counted 17, but anyway, 25 or 17 is still a large number. And they are very well kept, you see. They were not demolished. He had a different destiny than, Sullivan or Adler. Or John Johansson, for that matter. Daliana and Florian, you attended, the presentation on John Johansson, no?
No, I didn't.
You didn't, okay. All right. So yeah, this is another house. I mean, it's impeccably kept. It's unbelievable, actually. Probably someone who is doing well lives now here and you know, takes care of the building. It's like new, you know, and it's from 1902, almost 120 years old.
The maid's room is pretty big in comparison with the guest room and the child's room.
You notice this? Where is the? I don't see it. I had a maid's room. I wish I had such a. I wish I was a maid. Yes, nice. Okay, we move forward. So we are again in the Oak Park suburb of Chicago, looking at some of the buildings built by Frank Lloyd Wrong when he was a little younger. I mean, between 20 and 40, something like this, when he left Oak Park. He wanted even bigger quarters. Now this is not a bad living room. And musical instruments and fireplace. Who said that life is not nice? Really, who said it? Even the bicyclists seem to acknowledge that something special going on there. I still don't like these bicycles at all. I don't know, they never saw Dutch bicycles. Yeah. Nathan Moore house from 1895-1923. This one is kind of interesting because it's almost as if I like that it has a certain level of hybridity. There is something Victorian about it, but it's also resolutely sculptural and modern. But you know, the sloping roof is, you could say, traditional. Plus, the angle is not usually used. No, it doesn't sound right. Usually used, he doesn't use this this angle for the sloping roof. Only in this house. It was modified actually, but it's an interesting house. I do have to say that in some important buildings by him, I don't like the material he uses for to cover the roof. Here is that stone, how it is called. I always have problems to remember this word in English. It's the most expensive material.
Is it slate?
Slate, exactly. Thank you, Azar. It's slate, and I like slate. That's why it looks convincing. But in other buildings, very important, you know, like the Robbie house, the material he uses for the roof, or maybe it was redone, kind of cheap. Anyway, here I like it. It's an interesting building, this one. Another house from 1909, Thomas Gale house, smaller than, and for someone less affluent, probably. The Peter Beachy house from 1906. He built a lot, this man, and he built also outside of Oak Park. The tree is magnificent, but it was not designed by him. Not a bad building though. But the building that impressed me the most, domestic architecture, was not Falling Water from the ones I saw, but the Cooley house in Riverside, River Drive or Riverside near Chicago. I liked it more than the Falling Water. I don't have it here because it's not in Oak Park, but a beautiful building. And you can feel the great affection he had for the Japanese culture. There I truly felt it. But this building is also impressive. Now, he deserved the success he had. He was good. Although in terms of ornaments, I like Sullivan more. He's more warm, there is a femininity in Sullivan's designs for ornaments that Wright is unable to achieve. And maybe he didn't aspire towards. I guess this is the proud owner or the proud owners of the house. Anyway, Yeah. Ah, I'm getting hungry. What does she have there? Jesus, I'm really hungry. I eat poorly. Anyway, actually, I'm very surprised I'm still alive because the scientists would say I should have been dead a long time ago, considering how I eat. I eat burnt meat like totally black because I forget about it and it becomes ashes. And I better not tell you because you'll never show up again at a presentation of mine. In this field, I'm a total wreck. Anyway.
You know, we don't have to eat your food, so it doesn't matter for us.
Yes, yes. Well, still, you know, it's about the impression you give. You know, is Oscar Balch house. Yeah, another big house and different than the other one. You also see a little bit of, somebody said that he was influenced by, in fact, that the engineer Bruce Danziger, he said that he was influenced by the Dutch style. Maybe there is some kind of, although I knew that the opposite also happened, or even without also, that he influenced the Dutch. But you could see here a certain play with the planes, the play with the planes, with the volumes. It's almost something a little bit the steel.
Yeah, what year is this? What year is this, Dan?
Ah, Bruce, hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
How are you? I'm happy you are here. I don't know. You see this one, but should be between 1900 and 1910, something like
yeah,
this.
so I think it's before he went to
the Netherlands. Yeah.
It's before. I think
When-
sort of Falling Water is after.
When did he go? Do you know?
I don't remember. I'd guess it would be
In the 20s, no?
Yeah, probably just after the war. Maybe.
Yes, yes.
Maybe after the Spanish flu.
Please don't mention it. You know, when are we going to get rid of the pandemic? How are things in Los Angeles with the pandemic?
Really, pretty bad, actually.
Really?
Yeah.
Because I think the governor there did a good job. Is coming back, the pandemic?
Yeah, it's really starting to hurt the economy. Hopefully it doesn't do irreparable damage. I missed the beginning of the talk. Wasn't this going to be about Adler?
Yes, well, unfortunately, I ended that presentation, and in between this one and the one on Adler was one on Sullivan. Sorry.
Yeah, could I interrupt a little bit? Is it just the five of us?
Please.
Florian, Anna, Daliana, and you, Dan. Is it okay if I interrupt a little bit?
Sure, more than a little bit, please.
Go ahead.
Sure.
Oh yeah.
We've been interrupting much, so yes.
Yes, go ahead.
And Dan, can I show my screen?
Sure, but I have to just a second. So I guess I have to exit this. I have to exit this, right? To stop.
Or-
Yeah, you should.
Or what-
You need to stop.
maybe